All right, with you. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to this meeting at which we're going to discuss the appalling phenomenon of targeted assassinations and massacres of Shia in Pakistan over recent years, and hopefully what we can do to put a stop to the phenomenon, both by the authorities in Pakistan and also by the wider international community. And I think there's several things that we ought to note in analysing the reasons for what's happening. The first is that Shia are being similarly attacked in other countries such as Iraq, Bahrain, Egypt and Indonesia. And in the Syrian opposition there are elements motivated by anti-Shia hatred. So the mindset that fuels the atrocities we're going to be looking at today is not confined to Pakistan. Second, we may conclude that what we're looking at here is correctly to be described as a genocide within the meaning of the UN Convention. And I'd like just to remind you in a few words of the definition of genocide in the Convention. It means any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnic, racial or religious group. A. Killing members of the group. B. Causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group. C. Deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. D. Imposing measures intended to prevent birth within the group. And E. Forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. Now I know that people hesitate in using the G word, even in the present case where numerous acts of the kind that were described in that definition are occurring regularly, because of the difficulty of linking the atrocities to a stated intent. As I expect you'll hear from our speakers, there are plenty of explicit statements by the perpetrators, in this case, of what their objectives are. Thirdly, we need to bear in mind the scale of the violence. It's calculated that over 22,000 people have been killed in the last few years, with no less than 413 perishing since the beginning of the current year on January 1st. In addition to the murders and massacres, it's estimated that 56,000 Shia have been driven from their homes and are internally displaced. Tens of thousands live in daily fear of attacks in places such as Parashidar, Pangu and Kuram. And fourth, I believe we ought to consider the ideology behind the crimes. We shouldn't focus simply on the atrocities that are committed, but what is the motivation for them, which people pay far too little attention to. And then finally, what are we going to do in the face of this relentless tide of persecution and mayhem? I suggest that, number one, we need to raise the awareness of the international community and demand action by the UN, and Shia organizations are already collecting hundreds of witness statements and first-hand reports which are being submitted to the special rapporteurs on extrajudicial, arbitrary and summary executions and on religious freedom, and we're asking the rapporteurs to act on those reports. All the evidence is being stored in an online database, and we intend to ask lawyers to examine the dossier to see whether it does in fact constitute a genocide, as we say. The database may also be important in bringing to justice the terrorists who are committing particular atrocities. And next, the new government in Pakistan needs to be asked to act against the terrorist organizations that are committing these crimes. The Lashkar-e-Jhangvi, the Sipa-e-Sahaba, and the TTP. I don't know whether you saw it, but this morning there was an official report on Pakistan's security institutions, which had been leaked to Al Jazeera, criticizes what it calls the collective incompetence and negligence of those institutions in the hunt for bin Laden. But they failed even more dismally in relation to the killers of the Shia, who are seldom arrested, even more rarely brought to trial, and practically never sentenced. The UK should offer to help Pakistan in reforming its security and intelligence agencies to make them fit for purpose. We should earmark some of the 446 million aid to Pakistan in 2014-15 to help the organisations dealing with the victims and their families. We should ensure that the Home Office's Country of Origin Information Service report covers the wave of atrocities against Shia. At the moment it stops short at December 2012, missing the crescendo of massacres which has occurred since the beginning of 2013. This meeting is an important milestone in what we're trying to do, and I'm very grateful to the distinguished scholars and experts who agreed to take part in it. With some reason, there's a lack of confidence in the initiatives of foreigners, but this is different. What we're seeking to do is to give a voice to the victims and their families.